order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Abbott?
Present.
Mr. Bratton?
Present.
Mr. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Mellis?
Present.
Ms. Parker?
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, next we have approval of agenda. Are there any changes in the agenda, sir? Really? I checked my email just to make sure there wasn't some agenda.
Jennifer was gone, we didn't have a choice if we wanted to change it.
Oh, well, there you go.
So I think we're good.
Okay, do I have a motion on approving the agenda?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Second. Second, okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Mellis?
Yes. Number 5, approve the minutes of the following meeting, the May 14th regular meeting and the May 23rd planning meeting. Are there any corrections? There's one, right?
Yeah, there was one. It was on the dental or the family medical. I abstained on that.
7D from May 14th.
Any others? During any others, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Second. Second, thank you. Roll call, please.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Abstain.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
And Mr. Mellis?
Yes. Number 6, public participation. Anybody sign up?
Nope.
Karen,
You've already participated, right?
you want to make a speech?
Like speech? Speech. No, okay. Okay, seeing none then, moving to 7, treasurer's recommendations and reports.
Thank you. Item 7A, requesting board approval of the May financial statements. Total expense $8,750,591.06, including $6.7 million in SCOIC expenses. Page 22 on your electronic copy summarizes the month of May financially. As we look at our final enrollment, this is kind of an attachment point that we use to look at our enrollment and how it's changed from year to year. We finished the year with 1,974 students, and that's literally the number of students and seats, which is an increase of 50 students or 2.6%. However, the way that we got to that is what's kind of interesting in terms of resident students growing by 82, while we had to decrease open enrollment by 32. So that's certainly a hit to our revenue when we look at decreasing open enrollment, but there's really no choice at that time as we try to balance the numbers and the class sizes. Again, as we kind of look through the end of the year, some of the costs that were a little higher than forecasted. One of those is is bus repairs. But again, the good news is that this is the type of expense that we will be able to fund out of our permanent improvement monies moving forward. So current carryover, as you can see, is $4.35 million. One more month, obviously, left in the fiscal year. So we'll see where we're at the end of the fiscal year. Any questions on the May financial statements or the checks that were written during the month?
I was just looking, I had a question about this, since you've shown it here with the number of students, just looking at the last 4 years, it's went up from 1761 to 1974. We went up 200 students.
No,
Those are residents.
the resident students were up 82.
82.
Yeah, so
Oh, there it is.
yeah. Open enrollment down 32, so the net change from last year to this year was 1924 to 1974, increase of 50 students in the far right.
Okay. We're going to be down a little bit more in open enrollment again next year.
Yeah, we've got 7 seniors leaving open enrollment, and doesn't look like we're going to be able to have that many kindergarten open enrollment.
150 resident kindergartners right now. It's 25 a class.
Okay, any questions about the treasurer's financial statements? No. Seeing none, then, or is there a motion to approve? Okay, I'll second that. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Mellis?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Item B, approve the following final appropriations for fiscal year 2018 as listed. by law, the board has to approve a final appropriation for the fiscal year prior to June 30th. And this basically sets the spending limits officially for each of these funds. The general fund is obviously basically straight from the 5-year forecast. All the other funds are either revenue driven or student activity funds or grants. So just setting the final appropriations prior to June 30th with this resolution.
And the 85 million and the 026 is everybody in the consortium?
Yeah, that's our consortium
Well,
fund.
Shazam.
Yeah, it's up there.
As
We're gonna be okay for a while.
Yeah. Okay for a while. Okay. Are there any questions about this issue? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
and Mr. Mills.
Yes.
Item C is approve the first temporary appropriations for our upcoming fiscal year 19. This is just legally, you cannot make expenditures without a set of appropriations in place. So this just allows us to do business beginning July 1st. I will bring back basically the first budget in September where we put in all of our new numbers, all of our new staff, all of our wish lists. So this is just a temporary resolution just to allow us to do business again starting July 1.
I did get a question at a graduation party. No, not the granddaughters, but another one. But when with the passage of the levy, when will people notice that on their taxes?
January.
That's what I
Well,
was talking about.
maybe February, whenever the
I
first
thought
half
January.
goes out next year, this bill's.
Well, that didn't feed them all wrong. Okay, any questions about the first temporary appropriation for 2019? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Mills.
Yes.
Item D, approve allocation of the June 2018 interest rebates from our qualified school construction bonds, requesting that they all go into the bond retirement fund. This is back from the bonds that we sold to build this building. They are interest-free, but we pay the interest up front, and then we're rebated from the IRS. But the resolution states by law, the board has to approve where to allocate those funds. Technically, they can be allocated into the construction PI fund or bond retirement. So at this point, we're just looking at bond retirement.
So when since you mentioned bonds, so when the bonds actually go on the quote, I guess you'd say market, so to speak, for the new building, so when will that be?
It's in an upcoming resolution, but it's looking like July 29th. They would go out for sale. So. There you go.
I will be expecting a large present. Then I'll be as old as Mrs. Mills for a few months. Oh, hey. She's already 60. So. All right. So any questions about the school construction law? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve? So moved. Thank you. Second. I'll second. Roll call, please. Roll call.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Mellis,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Parker.
Yes.
Item E, approve the administrative salary index, which would be effective July 1st, 2018. You have the new proposed schedule in your packet. Page 39 of the electronic copy has 8 different salary schedules. Some of them are in the same columns like middle school principal and assistant high school, but you've got the base and you have the number of days. There is one change in terms of the number of days, and that is the 4th column over the activities director was 240 and is now 260. The other positions, the days have remained the same. We've just increased the base. The 3rd page shows you each individuals who occupy those respective positions, the step they are on, and their new salary, and what the actual increase is. As you can see, the increases vary. Most of the bases were increased by 2%, like the teachers and the classified staff. There were a couple of individuals that are going up a step, which is about 1%. I've made notes there on the far right, Mr. Hahn and I, if it's anything different than that. So if you look at the total increase is just a little over 2.3%. So we're comfortable with that amount. It's in the forecast. Actually, it was a little bit higher in the forecast. So we feel like this scale and these amounts are well within what we had planned.
So you've added days then to the activity director, and basically the pay is basically about the same.
That's correct. Yeah, you can see his change there. It's the third line down on the individuals, obviously.
Any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Mellis.
Yes.
Item F is approve a resolution of the declaration of official intent with respect to the reimbursement of temporary advances made for capital expenditures to be made from subsequent borrowings. Basically, a fancy legal way of saying that while we're waiting on our bond issue money to come in, if we need to make expenditures from our general fund, such as like for a survey or something that needs to happen in expedited fashion, we would be allowed then to, once we borrow and receive the bond proceeds, to reimburse our general fund up to $100,000. We don't have to do it, but having this resolution in place allows us to do it if we need to go down that road. So that's common for when you pass the bond issue in May, just the timing that it just takes to get the proceeds. So we're not straining our general fund before we get receive the proceeds.
Okay, any questions about the reimbursement possibilities, I guess? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
and Mr. Mellis.
Yes.
And finally, we'd like to recognize the following donations to the Bloom Carroll Local School District, Fairfield Union Schools, $297.75 to the BC Cheerleading Fund in memory of Leah Jackson, and the Hall of Heroes Gym, dumbbells for the Bloom Carroll Weight Room, approximate value $2,100. Thank you to both of those groups for those donations.
Okay, is there a motion to approve? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Mellis.
Yes. 8, old business, approve amending the 2018-2019 calendar to move the fall primary school parent-teacher conference date from October 25th to November 8th, 2018. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, what we got into last year at the primary school, those were the dates that they had submitted, but it ended up being on trick or treat night in Carroll. So it was quite a conflict, and we had to change it. Well, we anticipate the same issue this year with the trick or treat being on the same night prior to Halloween. So we're just going to go ahead and move it now. That way, all K-12 conferences are scheduled for the same night, the same 2 nights.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Mellis.
Yes. And 9, superintendent's recommendations and reports.
All right, number 9, just a couple things. I did pass out a spreadsheet with some test results from the spring of 2018 state test. Remember, this was the first year that all tests were done, not only in the fall with the 3rd grade reading guarantee in November, but also all spring testing was done online. The previous school year, in 16-17, the 3rd grade reading guarantee in the fall was done in paper pencil. So this was the first real year that all testing was done online. When I first saw the results, I kind of scratched my head, and sometimes it's easy to get discouraged with the way the state is determining success in Ohio right now. But I don't want our teachers or our support staff to feel that we are failing. We are not, and I believe Ohio public schools in general are doing well. We can all do better, but I don't believe that the state of Ohio is doing as poorly with student achievement that these new state test results indicate. If you look on the far right column at the state averages, please keep in mind that in order to meet the indicator, you have to score 80% of your students proficient at that grade level or at that test. And it used to be 75, the state bumped it to 80. So right now, the state of Ohio was 0 for 21 in terms of student achievement, reaching the 80% proficiency in any area. Again, I think public schools are doing a little bit better than that. You can see where I'm not going to name any other districts for the record, but you can see on your spreadsheet that in Fairfield County, we certainly have the highest by a very large number of indicators. We reached 9 out of 21. We actually improved the percent proficient from last year in 12 out of 21 areas, but met 9 out of 21 indicators. The next closest district, one of our neighbors, was at 6 out of 21, which is usually very competitive with us, or we're right there with them. And then after that, there was one district with 5 out of 21, and then the other districts in Franklin and Fairfield County were either 0 for 21 or 1 or 2 out of 21. So, I think what we need to do from a curriculum and instruction and teaching standpoint is look at the results. We can do an item analysis and really look at what areas of each test did we not do well, and which standards are students showing a trend over a couple years where we're maybe not performing real well on a specific indicator, just not a test or grade level. And then work with our teachers and our curriculum director and our principals to identify strategies to target areas that we're showing deficiencies in. And that's what we can use this data for. But to determine whether we're a successful district based on this, current measures in Ohio, I feel would be an injustice to the work that educators are doing across the state of Ohio in public education. I do believe we're better than this. In Franklin County, I've only heard of 2 districts that are higher than our scores. So when I put it in perspective, we're going to be one of the top districts in Central Ohio in terms of the number of indicators met on the fall report card when it comes out. But I think you have to take it with a grain of salt. And again, I think we're doing a lot of good things there. So I believe that our students' experience is much more than a snapshot on a certain day taking a test. And I talk about that a lot. But I just want to reiterate all the other opportunities and programs and services and the experience that our students get to have at Blue Carroll. It's more than just showing up and taking a test. Okay.
You get feedback from the state. I mean, how could they possibly think it was justified?
It'll be
zero.
When this really becomes public, it'll be curious to see what kind of spin they put on it. If they will put a spin on it, or if they will say public education is failing. Because I know
It is an election
as a
year.
parent and as a superintendent and former principal and teacher, that students are doing more and learning more in-depth with the curriculum, being asked to do more difficult things and think more critically, honestly, than probably any of us have to in school. And they're learning things at an earlier age, and students are able to do more. And it's, when you get out there in the classrooms, you see how intelligent our students are, just not here, but around the area. So,
And at an earlier age, I mean, they're taking foreign language at an earlier age. They're taking Algebra 1 up at an earlier age, et cetera.
absolutely. So I wanted to kind of update you with some of that with the state testing results. We are getting these results earlier, which is nicer. It gives us a little bit of time to prepare. It makes it more meaningful. It would be nice to see the state move the testing windows back a little bit if possible, since they're able to get the results so quickly now to the districts. And that might help with the start of school in the future. The other things I wanted to mention, I just wanted to really thank our staff for the work they've done. This is kind of the end of the year board meeting. Again, just so impressed with our staff, with instruction and support of our students. I think we're making a lot of improvements with curriculum and adoption and identifying the resources that we're benefiting from and making decisions, good decisions to impact instruction. So I like what we're doing with our, in the classroom, and also with technology and the integration of technology, but still making sure that students aren't spending their entire school day using a device and are getting to interact and collaborate with each other. and be creative. So just really impressed this year. I think our staff should feel very proud of the work they have done, because I am proud of them. And then with relationships and communication, as I look back on this year, I feel that we, as a staff and board, our administrators, I think that we really lended a listening ear to our community, and found ways to engage our community and get more involvement from our parents and community members that have nothing to do with their school district. At this point, they don't have a vested connection besides living here, but we're getting more and more people involved in our school district and being more proud of our district. Obviously, we made a lot of strides providing some permanent improvement funds for our district that we've never had, and also improvements in safety and the future of our facilities, and a vision and direction, not only with instruction and the relationship piece, but also providing better, safer facilities for our students. And then we're going to continue to fulfill our new mission, vision, and values, and like I said, take care of honoring what we've done in the past, but also preparing our students for their futures. And I just feel good about the work that was done this year, although we have a lot more to do as we look into the future. And then the only other update I wanted to give was also, we're going to get to it here, but just remember the planning session on the 20th we will be canceling. So I just wanted to remind you to update your calendars there as well, if it's agreed upon that we cancel the planning session.
I'd like to add that just looking back, though, I've been retired 16 years, but looking back 20, would not believe how many different ways the testing has been changed over the years. I mean, it just seems like they change it about every 3 years or so, and then once you kind of learn what's going on and what you need to get done by what time period, it changes. I mean, it's an ever-changing target, kind of like shooting ski or something, but you can't get it down. Then when the scores come out and they're not good, it's like, oh, well, like you said, public education's failing. No, not really. Considering that you have to take everybody that shows up at the front door, you don't get to, people pick and choose.
That's right.
Like ECOT or whoever, or appropriate school, you take them all.
And, I think it's become, I think there's some validity with the results. I mean, you can't completely ignore them. You have to find the benefit of them. However, in my conversations with colleagues and teachers and other superintendents, and it's becoming a joke, these tests. They just don't have any credibility anymore. They changed 3 times in 4 years.
Right.
It's just very difficult to put.
A lot of hoops to jump through.
Yeah, any validity.
What test do you measure on anymore, because they have changed so much? When you go back and look at historical data, which one do you base it on?
Right. Across the state.
Yeah. You did bench if you were, playing baseball. I'd be sitting for a while.
So if there's, let's move on to 9B under students and programs. Number 1, approve the adoption of the following English language arts program to be implemented with the 2019 school year. And that would be in grades 6 through 8, Study Sync with McGraw-Hill. And then My Perspective is the ELA program that we're selecting with Pearson for grades 9 through 12. We've worked with, our curriculum director has worked with the teachers, parents, the principals in identifying a program that they feel will challenge our students. Again, not all of it is online. A lot of the resources anymore are online. In our K-4, we adopted a program the previous year called Journeys. And then there's kind of a transition year with 5th grade teachers having access to Study Sync instructional materials. They don't necessarily need to adopt the entire curriculum at that grade level, but it's more of a transition year from elementary into middle school, and our teachers do have access if you were wondering what's going on at K-4 and then with the 5th grade. So we kind of did a pilot year with Study Sync, and we really liked it in the middle school, and then the high school staff felt like we needed to shift things up. It's a long time for kids to be on the same program, and there are a lot of consistencies between Study Sync and My Perspectives, but yet we didn't want the kids to see the same platform year after year after year from grade 6 through 12.
What is this really replacing? I mean, when we talk about being innovative, technology driven, from what our current platform is.
Yeah, our current platform is very old. I think it goes back to 2002, and the standards have been updated several times.
That's when I retired.
So, when I talk about instructionally, we've made some adjustments over the last few years. And with our math and ELA, the math is 3 years old. I think we're starting to see the impact of those, and our teachers and students and parents are feeling comfortable. I think sometimes, we switch too fast in education, and just because it's up for adoption doesn't mean you always need to, but you need to make sure your curriculum is aligned to the state standards. But I think that, with math, ELA, science was adopted a few years ago as well. We need to start to settle and really get into these in depth and start to see the benefits of them. So, again, K-4 was done the previous year with Journeys. 5th grade is a transition year, and then 6 through 8 will be study sync. My perspectives with Pearson will be grades 9 through 12. It'll be implemented this fall. Number 2, approve April 27th, 2019 as the date for the junior-senior prom to be held at the Aladdin Shrine Center in Grove City from 7 to 10 p.m. Number 3, approve the kindergarten school bus safety program for registered BC kindergarten students to be held August 7th, 2018 from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. at the primary school. Number 4, approve the 2018-19 high school and middle school student athletic handbooks. Number 5, approve the following summer camps for 2018, which include overnight trips as indicated in bold print. Teams will be accompanied by their respective coaches and parent chaperones for overnight trips pending mandated background checks for volunteers. Boys soccer, Mr. Sprigg. It'll be the high school team camp out at Strongsville, or the Strongsville Showcase, July 27th through the 29th. And then cross country, we'll be having a day camp that will basically meet here early in the mornings, and then we'll be going out to these various locations for running, and then return back to the campus at Old Man's Cave, Clear Creek Metro Park, and Slate Run Metro Park, July 23rd through the 26th, 2018. Are there any questions about any of those items?
Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Mills?
Yes.
Okay, under 9C, personnel and employment, number 1, approve the voluntary transfer of Janice Raver from transportation supervisor to bus driver, effective with the 18-19 school year on a continuing contract at step 18, effective with the 18-19 school year. Number 2, approve the voluntary transfer of Billy Sutton from lunchroom monitor at the intermediate school to intervention aide at the middle school. It's a new position on a continuing contract at step 0, effective with the 18-19 school year. Just a reminder, that was to decrease the class size from 29 down to 24 or 5 in 6th grade. Number 3, approve the employment of Maggie Connor as an elementary guidance counselor, district social worker on an initial sequence 1-year limited contract at step 6 with a master's degree for the 18-19 school year, pending timely receipt of verifications and background checks effective August 13th, 2018. Number 4, approve the employment of Jessica Storts as an intervention teacher at the middle school on an initial sequence 1-year limited contract at step 0 with a master's degree for the 18-19 school year, pending timely receipt of verifications and background checks, and that's to fill the vacancy created by the voluntary transfer of Jennifer Mason to a 5th grade intervention specialist. That'll be effective August 13th, 2018. Number 5, approve the employment of Kristen Rapel as an intervention teacher at the intermediate school on an initial sequence 1-year limited contract at step 1 with a bachelor's degree for the 18-19 school year, pending timely receipt of verifications and background checks to fill the vacancy created by the voluntary transfer of Melissa Dinan to a 3rd grade position effective August 13th, 2018. Number 6, approve the employment of Carmen Spellman as a transportation supervisor for the 18-19 school year on a 1-year limited contract at step 12 effective August 1st, 2018, and on an as-needed basis between July 1st, 2018 and July 31st, 2018 to fill the vacancy created by the voluntary transfer of Janice Raver. Number 7, approve the employment of Kevin McGee as a van driver on a 1-year limited contract for the 2018-19 school year to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Ted Harrison. Number 8, approve the employment of Ken Kohlhofer as a lunchroom monitor at the middle school on a 1-year limited contract at step 0 for the 18-19 school year to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Mary Scott. Number 9, approve the FMLA leave request of Taylor Mavis, effective on or about September 10th, 2018 through approximately December 10th, 2018. Number 10, approve Misty K. Wilson as a home instructor beginning June 1st, 2018 for 30 hours at a rate of $30 per hour. Number 11, approve amending the following job descriptions, the maintenance supervisor and the transportation supervisor. Number 12, approve the employment of the following 2018 summer custodial workers as presented A through C. Number 13, approve the employment of Sarah DeMars as a substitute bus driver for the 18-19 school year. Number 14, approve the employment of Christopher Hughes as an IT auditorium assistant for the 18-19 school year on an as-needed basis. Number 15, approve the retirement request for severance pay for Carol Black. Number 16, approve the following Wednesday, Saturday school and detention monitors for the high school for the 2018-19 school year as presented A through I.
I noticed at the top, I don't believe Jennifer went to Amanda, but she does have teachers covering detention duties instead of covering.
Covering.
I just point that out to you.
Careful, you were on.
Just keep going, Sean.
Number 17, approve the placement of the following employees on the administrative supervisor salary schedule as listed 1 through 11. Number 18, approve the following athletic supplemental contracts for the 18-19 school year as presented A and B. Number 19, approve Kristen Neff to provide services for kindergarten screening May 30th, 2018 to June 1st, 2018 at a tutor hourly rate. We just missed, I guess she showed up to work the screenings and we just didn't catch her on the previous agenda, so we had to go back and get her approved to be able to pay her. I just want to say this group that we're hiring is outstanding. I am very excited with all the positions, but there are some critical positions to the district in the classroom and some supervisory positions and a new position that we have that I don't think we could have done better. And I think every hire that's the most important part of our job is to provide really good people and find really good people to work with our kids. But I'm really excited about this group, so just wanted to add that in there.
Okay, are there any questions? Past couple of pages of hirings and information. Anyone?
Any questions?
Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mrs. Parker?
Yes.
And Mr. Mills?
Yes.
All right, 9D, contracts and agreement. Approve a revised contract for security services, the Fairfield County Sheriff or a school resource officer for the 18-19 school year. Again, same thing, could not be happier with who has been selected. We interviewed the final 2 candidates. They were both outstanding. This one has volunteered on his day off. He was paid, I'm sorry, he did special duty on his day off on Mondays to be in our district. He really enjoyed being here, decided to apply for the position, made it through at the sheriff's office to be sent on for interviews with us. And is a former U.S. Marine volunteer EMT at the Greenfield Township Fire Department. He's from Fairfield County, went to Lancaster High School, has been in law enforcement for 11 years now, and again, he served our country, he's volunteered in our townships. I think he brings a lot to the district, and saw the kids have fun with him and connect with them, and I think those relationships will get stronger. And again, I think we got a good person.
I noticed it says 177 days, so we're not including July, I take it, or?
Yeah, no, we're not. We
Not the weeks.
yeah, we pay for the days that we contract for, and we had on the previous one, it was 175 days, and they were only student days. So I did request 2 more additional days, and of course his hourly rate was a couple $2 different compared to what we approved on the initial contract. So I had to bring it back to you. So you can see the total costs there in your packet, but again, he's outstanding. I thought he needed the day to kind of prepare to get ready for the school year.
Yeah.
There was also a professional development day that we added in November, and there are several required safety drills that we need to do, and I thought it would be excellent to have him in here, working with our staff and doing some presentations and training and kind of inspecting the emergency procedures when we actually do drills with the staff that are maybe a little bit more intensive than what we sometimes do with our students. So I wanted him to be familiar with that emergency process, so that's why I added a couple extra days.
So the 59,810.45 is this one?
Yeah, I think the previous was 53.
And they do not send backup, like if he should call off, we don't know.
They don't, no, they don't, they'd have to pull somebody from
Right.
another, you know, and we'll see how that goes. His
Yeah.
attendance has been very good, I did check on that, but we will have to
just
see.
contact local, just to let them know we have nobody.
Yeah, we
So,
usually.
you know what I mean, just
Yeah.
so they can be more.
And what's tough, the reason I feel much better about having a resource officer here is because there are times where the Village of Carroll will not have anybody on duty.
Right.
Right.
And we don't know that schedule all the time, but, they said that actually if he would ever miss, they would have another resource officer from another school kind of come over, check on us a little bit, during the day, and we would also work with Lithopolis, who has somebody on duty to go over to our, intermediate school, and future preschool, so, there was again a slight increase in that difference, but I added a couple days and, the hourly rate was different.
Any questions? Discussion. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second this one. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Millis?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
And Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Okay, nothing under 9E, and then 9F, personnel resignations and retirements. Number 1, accept the resignation of Chad Middle at the middle school as middle school assistant principal effective July 31st, 2018, contingent upon approval of agenda item 7E. And then number 2, F2, would be accept the resignation of Daniel Grove as varsity assistant football coach for the 18-19 school year.
Any questions on those two?
Is, Mr. Little, is it just because of the additional days? Or?
Well, a little history there. When the full-time assistant principals, when they brought 5th grade over here, there wasn't an assistant principal. A year later, they created a full-time assistant principal's position. But Mr. Little's position, he had a supplemental contract to be an assistant principal here in the middle school for 0.12 parts of the day, basically a period. We no longer need that position, right? And with the amount of work in the athletic department that has increased over the years, and the amount of Saturdays he has to work, and 3 Sundays that he attends mid-state big banquets to represent the district, I just don't feel that it's effective anymore. And I just think with Mr. Matchett, he's able to handle the assistant principal duties. And then Mr. Young is obviously the principal. I feel that's adequate. We don't need this 0.12 assistant principal's position anymore. So.
Any other questions? I went to the state track meet, and who was ahead of me, just ahead of me in the line was Mr. Roll. Didn't offer me a free ticket or anything. Just kidding. Okay, seeing no questions, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Millis?
Yes.
Mark that.
Okay, approve the proposal engagement letter between Bricker and Eckler LLP for construction legal counsel services in connection with the implementation of the district's facilities master plan. Approve CMR as a project delivery method for the construction project associated with the passage of issue 3 in May 2018. And CMR again stands for,
Construction manager at risk.
meaning the rest is all the construction manager. C, approve the underwriter engagement letter with Robert W. Baird and Company for bond underwriting services who you two gentlemen met with, correct?
Yes.
D, approve the resolution providing for the sale and issuance of not to exceed $30 million of school improvement bonds and authorizing matters related thereto. And approve the following policies for first reading. Professional staff evaluation, criminal records check, evaluation of professional staff, suspension and termination of professional staff. 7, career technical education. 8, college credit plus. 9, college credit plus. 10, KKA recruiters in schools. And they're limited to what, the commons area kind of, or cafeteria?
College recruiters, actually, we put them
Oh,
typically,
college, excuse me.
yeah,
You just said recruiters, I was thinking military.
yeah, the military, they're assigned to tables, that students are not at in the cafeteria. College recruiters, actually go to the classrooms, and we find an empty classroom, the kids can sign up if they're interested in that college or university, and then they can attend that at whenever that meeting takes place, usually during lunchtime.
13 admission of exchange students, 14 student suspension. So has that going to change with Senate Bill 216?
For some K to 3,
K to 3, right?
yeah, it looks like,
Okay.
yeah.
What was that, the OSB?
Which another reason why we need somebody that can,
Oh, I think
or a
so.
behavioral therapist,
Right.
which is exactly what we're being able to hire, and that counselor to be able to work through some of those emotional and social emotional behavioral needs of students rather than a suspension, so.
I mean, I was surprised when I did Saturday school for about 10 years, how young some of the students were working, something we found out what the student did, it's like, well, I guess I had to do something with
Yeah,
it.
you don't
Trying to
wanna-
kick the teacher in the shin or call them,
Yeah, you don't
extra
wanna have to do
dirty
that,
names.
you don't have to.
Okay, 15 emergency removal of the student, and 16 student expulsion. Have to approve the cancellation of the Board of Education planning session scheduled for June 20th, 2018. And G, approve the resolution naming Nathan Conrad as acting superintendent in the event extended absences or leaves by Sean Hahn effective immediately.
Yeah, and just, I don't plan on going anywhere, I do, by contract, have to take 5 days off in a row, so, but my family will be doing something this summer, so
Right.
when I'm gone, sometimes Jennifer will be able to get a hold of me, if you guys need to get a hold of me, contact Jennifer, I'm gonna be leaving the 18th through the 22nd, Jennifer can get a hold of me, but if not, a quick decision had to be made, if there's a huge emergency and I can't be reached, then Mr. Conrad will be the contact for Jennifer, okay, or for you.
Okay, are there any questions about the following? Yes, on page, well, in line, page 7 of 8. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Second. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mrs. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Mellis.
Yes. 11, we have board reports and information. A, Board of Education liaison updates. Facility management, nothing new to manage, right, Mr. Abbott? Except my addition skills. Anyway, number 2, personnel labor management. We've got nothing going on. Number 3, OSBA representative.
Nothing new going on except for, some more, conferences coming up, checking for you, Mark.
That's okay, I'll pass. Your name's down there, Mrs. Parker, thank you. Number 4, policy, we had a meeting, what, a month or so ago?
Yeah.
5, safety, health, and wellness,
No.
and 6, finance.
Okay.
Okay. And D, we have PTO booster, Board of Education meetings, we have the 16th Board of Education regular meeting at 6 p.m. in the middle school library. One thing I didn't add with the, seeing all the teacher scores is, if you look at some of the school districts that, just the 2 that were close to us, Canal and Pickerington, both of them, and I'm not saying everything about education is money, because I don't think it is, but, we've got teachers here that are here because they want to be here, and if you look at the cost per pupil, what they're spending per pupil in Pickerington and Canal Winchester, there's a lot more than we're spending per pupil, obviously, and we're getting a lot of bang for our education dollars, I think, I feel. I didn't know, I thought I'd throw that out there before I forgot to say that. Number 12, adjourn or is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to
Yeah,
approve?
the only thing for that, so are we in agreement, we're gonna cancel the
Yes.
meeting on 20th?
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Did we have a voting line there?
did we?
No, we didn't have one.
No,
Okay, I'm
we
sorry.
did.
we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did, Conrad. Yeah, it was before Conrad.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, guys, again, I'm just, I'm gonna be gone the 18th through the 22nd. Any of you need to get a hold of us, Travis will be here, I think.
Well,
Jennifer will be here.
if we were gonna get something, some kind of presentation from Brick and Eckler or from Shore, it'd be, it might be a meeting, reason to have the meeting, but
Kind of
there
feel like
isn't.
we've already done that. Tony will be submitting a proposal that you, will be asked to approve at our
Right.
July meeting, but Tony will be submitting a proposal for design services and an agreement. He should be submitting it this week to us, and then because you have approved, you've approved the construction manager at risk, in the engagement letter, I can now have, Sylvia Gillis begin working on documents and the agreements with Tony because it's complicated, but we have to ask OFCC for a waiver to modify documents or use AIA, the American Institute of Architecture, agreements that have to be used when you do construction manager at risk. There's certain types of forms that have to be used, and you have to make modifications to them. So we have to ask OFCC for a waiver, and then Sylvia and Tony will work out the agreement. We will get it. We will bring it to you to ask you for approval, and then we have to start the request for qualifications for different construction managers, and that's a 30-day period that we have to post in the newspaper until we can actually make a decision.
But by having a construction manager, we really do have less exposure as far as.
Well,
things being
in
done.
construction manager at risk, the construction manager actually holds the contracts rather than us being stuck in the middle when there's disputes.
Right.
And again, we will get our construction manager involved early on with our architect in the design process. And then at about 80% of the way through the design process, there will be a guaranteed maximum price from our construction manager. And that way they can work out, we, with them, can work out any major issues and know them up front, rather than you start the project and the design is done, and then you get out in the field and there's a lot of change orders that can.
It's really the way to go. I mean,
Yeah, Joe,
a few
I talked
years
about
ago,
on the
it
way
was
out the
all
door.
crimes. So the first, I mean, just speaking from experience, the first time we looked at the drawings was a couple weeks before the project started. And there were so many changes right off the bat, which, you know, for the contractors it was good. For the school district, it was not. It just,
Right.
for us, I mean, it's more than.
And again, I don't want you to think that, I mean, we researched it a lot, talked to other superintendents, other districts that are in projects, but we also went to a firm that specializes in construction law, or has a department that specializes in construction law, and got their input and their recommendation, which they came here and told you what they would do. Tony, who I feel very good about at this point in my experience, I know Travis does too, recommended the same thing, because that delivery or project delivery method has changed a lot in the last 5 or 6 years. And Tony obviously recommends that it's the way to go as well.
Correct.
I think we have to rely on some people that deal with these things every day, but it will not be a perfect process. We will have lots of things that we bring to you to get input on and work through and make decisions, but that's kind of where we are right now. So the beginning of this process is a little bit slower for us, but then once the project gets started, because your designer and your construction manager were involved, once they break ground and get the surveys done, some of the site tests done, then it starts to move pretty quickly. So I know there are districts and superintendents that I've talked with that passed issues last May in 2017 that still haven't broken ground. Okay.
Yeah, but some people ask me about, when are you gonna break ground?
There are districts that passed issues in November of 2017 that are just getting started with their design process. So we're right where, according to my conversations with the attorneys, we're right where we need to be. Travis is working on the issuance of the bonds. He's keeping me informed. I'll be involved as, where I need to be, but he's working on the funding, and then we're both working on the design agreements and construction manager process. So feel pretty good with where we are. But if you get questions in the community, people say, why can't you speed this up? These aren't things that you want to rush to.
I've told a few people that have asked me, I said, there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that you don't know about.
You pay for it later on, but we are working. I don't want you to think we're not working, and you'll start to see Tony more in late August and September, and that's when we'll start to set up the design schedule. So that's kind of where we are right now. But there's a lot of documents and approvals that have to be done by you guys, and we can't do one until we sometimes get approval on something else from you before we can move on to the next one.
So when the bonds were done for this building, Travis, so did a bunch of people buy the bond? Did one or two groups buy the bond? I'm just curious.
Mainly some big groups bought the bonds. There were some local buyers. We have Fidelity that will help the local buyers get to the market and be able to have access to the bonds. And we'll have a lot more on that later in July.
But it's probably fairly large figures, like 10,000 or more.
It's $5,000, the minimum denomination. Yeah.
Had a few phone calls about it, but that was one thing we talked with the different underwriters. bond underwriter proposals. And they said Fidelity would be able to issue them locally.
Mhm.
So
I know, I talked to one of my financial people last week, I think it was, and I was asking him about it, well, probably gonna be 5 or 10,000.
Mhm.
It's not the
Yeah,
long-
5.
Do we have a project timeline and what approvals we need to have? So obviously we need to approve.
Yeah,
They're
in your,
different.
I'd send it to you in terms of actual dates. I mean, where we are right now, July will be the, agreement, the design services agreements. We will then have to, go out for, Bricker and Eckler will be helping us with the request for qualifications for construction managers, and we have to narrow that down. Tony will work with us on getting the facilities liaisons to be involved with that, but then we have to get the request for proposals from the 3 or 4 that we narrow it down to.
So how are they hired? By us,
Well, yeah, by,
Yes.
or what?
no, by the board,
By the
by the
board.
board, yeah.
Would you be interviewing them then?
I
And
think,
you bring names,
Mhm.
a name or names down?
yeah, we will be bringing.
Well, along with you and Mr. Abbott, would probably be good for the, if we can do that.
You sent that.
I think I sent this to you guys a while ago with some of these PowerPoints, maybe in May, if not, I can send it again, but it has the, outline for CMR selection and evaluation process and the next steps, so that kind of explains where we are. If you don't find it, just let me know, I'll send it to you again. Okay. So I think that's it.
Any other questions? I have my several. Anybody else have something they forgot to ask? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn or recess? In this case, adjourn. So moved. Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Mills?
Yes. Okay, no meeting on the 20th.